So we're very grateful to launch this evening lecture series, and today, to kick off the evening salon series, is Dr. Bruce Baird. We're so happy to have him with us. Yes, a round of applause. Just a brief introduction, and then we'll get started with the lecture. Bruce Baird is a professor of Japanese at the University of Massachusetts, and he has published dozens of articles and essays over the years in numerous publications on Butoh, on Hichikata Tatsumi, and the cultural development and historical development of Butoh. And he also has published several books on Butoh, including Hichikata Tatsumi and Butoh, Dancing in a Pool of Grey Grits, and A History of Butoh, the more recent publication from Oxford University Press. He's also the co-editor with Rosemary Candelario of the Rutledge Companion to Butoh Performance. So we're very grateful. Yes, now it's open access! Go online and enjoy this open access wealth of resourceful information. So we're very grateful to have him here with us today. And without further ado, Bruce Baird.
We got out of order, I guess. So there's anyway. We'll hurry past that. But I have to say one thing. Yvonne is going to cut up a piece of paper into tiny pieces of paper, and you just put your name on it, and I'm gonna give away a copy of this book to someone tonight with a small caveat. If you're one of my friends, you are not allowed, because if one of you wins, then everyone's gonna think I cooked the books, okay? So it has to be like, this is your first or second time having met me. It can't be like, this is your 48th time having met me. You're disqualified, okay? Sorry, friends. Anyway, okay, everybody else, Yvonne's gonna pass around a tiny piece of paper. All you do is put your name on it, we'll put it in my baseball cap, and we will draw out, and you will get, I will mail you a free copy of my book. Okay, alright, so, we've had 2 days of workshops, and they've been fantastic, but what I'm kind of amazed about the workshops is they're fantastic and they're completely different from each other. And so I thought that maybe the way to organize what I want to say tonight is, how do we account for the fact that we're here for Butoh and we go to 4 amazing different workshops, and what's up with that, right? So anyway, so that's what I want to do here, is try to like trace a path from the beginning to 4 really different but all really amazing workshops. Anyway, so everything gets started in 1959 with a dancer called Hichikata Tatsumi, and he explodes onto the dance world with a dance called Forbidden Colors, which features a man giving a younger man a chicken, and forcing that younger man to kill the chicken, and then having sex with the younger man. Shocking for sure, but the beginning of this is really dances which tell tiny stories. A dance of passing a woman as a bride from one family to the other, a dance about sending a son off to war. So these are like little tiny vignettes. With the man giving a chicken to a young man and then forcing the guy, we might not know what the hell this means, but it's got this kind of little tiny story to it. Okay, pretty soon they leave that behind, and the impetus for this is when Hichikata stages this dance featuring male-male homoeroticism, the dance world just explodes. And so he's like, well, F you, and so he and all of his friends basically leave the dance world, and they go and they befriend And Kobayashi, in the A group, she sort of talked about this. They befriend the artists, the sculptors, the literature people, and they just detach from the dance world, and they just start doing all sorts of really batshit crazy stuff. In one of the dances, Hijikata has his partner and wife dance with a marble stuck up her anus, and she has to do arabesques and ballet, stuff like that, but she can't let the marble fall. That's the dance, right? Okay, we got lots of fun stuff going on in this era, but it's connected to happenings and fluxus and surrealism and neo-Dadaism. There's this big, huge churn in post-war Japan through the mid-60s, and Hijikata is right in the center of it and befriending all of these people and doing this stuff. In one dance, they just strap bellows to their body and pump bellows, and I guess who had the dance I think it was Joan had the dance with the air, right? And I'm sorry, anyways, I guess they had, yeah. Right? Anyway, so I guess they were giving each other air. I don't know. Anyway, a fun era, crazy stuff. Okay. I got a few photos here. So this is this fun kind of helicopter move that they do, and you can see that one guy is, they're counterbalancing with the weight, and so they're not, in the end they do fall over, and they're recording, they kind of fall out of this, but that's pretty cool. The Olympics is happening at this time, and sport in Japan is transforming because in the pre-war era, sport has come into Japan, but it's not yet sort of like sport. But then in the post-war era, you have this reaction against all of the old martial arts. And in the process, the martial arts all become sports, and they become a little bit tamer, and so we get judo. The roots of judo go way back, but contemporary judo is really explodes in this post-war anti-violence era, right? So sports have changed, so it's probably not an accident that we get kind of sports in here. And then, here, they've got this dance where they've got this structure in the back of the stage space, and they've got these men, and they've stolen these Victor Nipper dogs from outside of barber shops and carted them into the space, and they're all, standing here peeing into the back of the stage space. So, you get the idea, right? It's pretty fun stuff. Here's another one where they're doing a tube dance, and they were supposed to suck each other up, but one of the dancers says he was disappointed because no one actually got sucked up, so that was a real bummer, Anyway, but, in one of the dances, we don't have a photo for the particular dance, but the costume designer covers Hijikata's body with plaster of Paris, and then the idea of the costume is that the plaster of Paris is going to dry on him, and then when he moves, however he moves, it's going to crack in distinctive ways, and it's also going to sort of provide a restriction on his movements, and he's not going to be able to move freely. So the idea is really that the costume is a real participant in the dance, and over time, that evolves into the white face and body paint that has become stereotypically associated with Butoh, but it gets a start there. And this is also based upon the sculptures of George Segal. These sort of like white, kind of alabaster-y looking sculptures. Anyway, all right. Eventually, that sort of phase runs its course, and Hijikata starts this super productive era in his dance. And it's going to take just a few minutes to flesh this out, but the important thing here is, first of all, that he's exploring himself. And why is he doing that? Well, he has this idea, and it's pretty common in the post-war era, that socialization is a big problem because it affects how you see the world, even what you can see in the world, and so how you move, how you act, how you talk. Socialization is this huge problem for them, and they want to find some way past socialization. So part of the trick here is that if you know what's formed you, then you can sort of be on the lookout for something that maybe you wouldn't have been on the lookout for. So you gotta hunt deep in your own past and account for what's formed you in order to, you're like, oh, I mean, like think about how today, we're sort of in this era where we're, you know, if someone accuses us of being a racist, we're not supposed to say, hell no, I'm no fucking racist. What we're supposed to do is sort of think about ourselves. Is there a possibility that along the way I could have absorbed something, right? I mean, you can think of that as parallel to what Hijikata is thinking about. What formed me along the way? And that's a big, huge process that's going to take him quite a long time to work his way through. But it also involves thinking about, you know, his hometown, and, you know, like places he's come, his community. He's thinking about lots of things. Simultaneously, he's still got surrealism in the background, okay? And so he starts to just use imagery work in order to transform movement. And so, can you see what's happening here? There's two things going on simultaneously. One is figure out what formed me, and the other is let's just throw shit against the wall and see kind of what sticks, what's interesting, right? The first dance in this era is called Hijikata Tatsumi in Japanese people, and he enacts a young girl, he enacts a gay man sort of cruising around. He's got all these characters that he's enacting in this dance. And what's particularly interesting is the title, like, Japanese people. Japanese people seems to be this big, wide open, if he's showing sides of himself, maybe he's showing sides of himself, but maybe he's also showing the broad range of Japanese people. So that's the dance number one, and he keeps going. Starts to have this kind of omnivore look at the world where he's trying to figure out every source he can find for this kind of interesting surrealist mashup. So he's looking for people who are sort of on the edges of society and thinking about them and looking at how they move, how they act, how they talk, stuff like this. He's looking at animals. In our workshops, we've definitely seen animals come into our workshops, and we've seen blind musicians come into our A workshop. And then figures from paintings. Now, it turns out that in the story of Butoh, the figures of paintings kind of come to overshadow the other things, and that's partly an archival problem. We have the notebook so we can see those things. It's harder to see when he's just in rehearsal saying, let's copy the movements of a prison convict. It's easier to see in the archive when we have a notebook where he's posted a painting. Anyway, so what does this look like? Hijikata made tons of scrapbooks, notebooks, lots of different stuff. So what you see on the left-hand side here is Hijikata's original scrapbook. This rather more neat handwriting is actually handwriting he's had a scribe do, and this kind of, I don't know if you can see this well, but this more kind of like messy handwriting is actually Hijikata's own handwriting. So in this case, we've got two sets of handwriting. And I've tried on the right-hand side to give you a sense about what this says. And just hold this in your mind. Let's don't go there yet. But you see all these strange things. Stiffen to dissolve, stiffen and dissolve. I don't know what's the difference between these two, but if you've been going to our workshops, you can probably already begin to think, oh, interesting, right? Two old women descend from the garden as if they are maggots. Right? Flesh lumps that have descended into the garden. Right? If you've been to the workshops, these are starting to ring the bell with you. You're like, I don't know what that means, but I can imagine that we could do something like that tomorrow, right? You know. Anyway, all right. Here is another Klimt painting, and out to the side, again, this is Hijikata's handwriting. Up at the top is a scribe's handwriting, but there are several faces in the shawl movement which traces the additional flexification which captures these. What Hijikata is doing here is coming up with prompts for movements. Ginger, ages ago, gave a discussion group of ours the idea that we could just call these restrictions on our movements. But restrictions, prompts, indications, something like that. They're like something to help people move in a different way from how they could move normally. Another one, again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see that sometimes it's, this hairstyle important. They're going to like pull a hairstyle out of here. The costume designer is going to put it on dancers. And then sometimes Bacon's beard that can sit. Your guess is really as good as mine about what he's trying to say or how this is going to end up in the end. Vivacious Cupid, night after vacation. Again, I got no idea what he has in his mind, but it's pretty damn fascinating, right? Whatever it is, okay? All right. So, if you try to step back from this, we start to see that Hijikata is doing a lot of different things with this imagery work or this evocation. So he's applying a kind of a quality to a movement. Could be heaviness, pliability, stretching, melting, collapsing. He's altering the amplitude of a movement. He's making a movement go through a body, and there's these fascinating moments when a movement comes from a leg and seems to skip the torso and come out the arm. He's transferring a movement. He's taking a movement that would be done normally by one limb and putting it in another limb. So he has this thing which is named after a painting of Belmer's, when Belmer, where it looks like it's a kind of a hand with it's superimposed on a foot with a high heel, and he's making the hand do the high heel with the thumb as the heel and the finger as the toes. He's altering the character doing the movement. So you could do the movement as an old woman, as a young woman, all sorts of characters. He's altering this. He's altering the background medium of the movement. And so, the way I like to think about this is, in other kinds of dance, you might say, well, take the movement and make the movement last 4 counts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And Hijikata might say, well, you should imagine dragging your arm through concrete. So maybe it's going to take you 4 counts to get around, but it's a very different kind of quality to the movement when you just drug your arm through concrete. Drug, is that really a word in that context? I think.
Yeah.
Dragged, drug. Drag. I mean, anyway. Where are we? Alter the sound that you imagine accompanies the movement in your mind. And Hijikata's dancer Wahuri says that they would, let me back up. So Japanese has lots of onomatopoeia. They have many more onomatopoeia than, for example, English has. They have onomatopoeia that makes match sounds like bang or something like that. They also have onomatopoeia of mental states. They have onomatopoeia of the, like the sound of cream dissolving into coffee. There's an onomatopoeia for that, right? Yeah. Do you want to know what the sound of cream dissolving is? Yeah. Suro. What's that?
Will you say again?
Suro. Did you get the cream going into the coffee? Suro. Pretty cool, right? Anyway, so they're like, well, what if we did this movement while we were imagining gotcha gotcha? Or what if we did it with gotcha gotcha, right? We have bang and crap like that, but we don't have that many. Sometimes he breaks up the movement into like tons of different component movements. They granulate the movement, and then there's that big category which I'm calling other, which is most of the stuff we're doing in our workshops is in the other category, which is being shocked by 1 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 volts of electricity. You're being bitten by, mosquito bites on multiple parts of your body and this, that kind of thing. Or being looked at from the upper right-hand corner of the stage, or having an ink pop you in the head right now, and then the ink dribble down your face. Okay. Now, I just want to take a quick detour about this word that maybe some of you have heard, Butoh, which stands for Butoh notation. As an academic, I'm not a fan of this word, and so, the dancers and the academics, I realize we don't always see eye to eye on these things, and that's fine, but I'll tell you why I'm not a fan of this word. Some of this right here, right, let's back up. Some of this actually can function as notation, in the sense that if you ask another hijikata dancer, can you do that thing? The dancer will often say, oh yeah, I know that. Sometimes the dancer will say, no, hijikata never taught that to me, I don't know what that is. But sometimes the dancer will say, oh yeah, I can do that, and then they'll pop something off. So in one sense, some of this is notation. But in another sense, this is just notes for himself, and then something happened later on. In the one sense, notation's a little bit funny. But then, back here, some of this is, what happens in your ears. Some of this is accompanied with smell. Right? And so this is why I'm not a fan of calling this a notation, as opposed to just, using some other word for it. Some people have called it hijikata method. Maybe that suggests more of a method than there actually is to this, but whatever. Anyway, I'm the academic, right? But I do think it's important to realize that hijikata is imagining using all 5 of your senses in this process. He's asking his dancers, think about smelling something. Smell the good smell. That's definitely in there for sure. He's asking them to hear things. He's asking them to think about tactile things. You're standing on razor blades, and that's going to affect the way you stand. Imagining flavors, everything. Okay? And then, of course, the visual one is a huge part of this. But again, that's a little bit of an archival thing. We don't have an archive of all the smells hijikata asked his dancers to think about. Or even sometimes he just asked them to actually smell them in order to give them practice, right? But what we do have is we have all the notebooks. So the visual, again, it sort of overpowers the others in this wide-ranging practice. All right. Then we get to sticking these things in sequences. This is one of Hijikata's students by the name of Mikami, made lots of notebooks, and she ended up publishing her notebooks. And they're available in an English translation by Rosa van Hensbergen. It's a great translation, so you can easily get this. It's called Body as Vessel. Anyway, so you start to put these things, you've got all this material, and then he starts to put them together in sequences. And notice again, some of these are quite physical. I don't know exactly how the left leg, oh, sorry, that was the right leg. I don't know exactly how the left leg raises, but left leg, but then there's this, be pulled from behind and up to the right, thing going on here, right? The sensation of light extends. Crouch 4 meters. Anyway, all right. Some of this is a little bit like a surrealist character preparation. So, in one of I think you were here for this one. In one of the workshops we attended, Kamano Hiroko gave us this thing with the flowers sprouting from the torso. And notice the smell blowing our eyelashes open. The one that I really liked here is this small pond behind the belly button with the artist living there. And then there's this small family of pioneers living behind your knee that had a new baby. Okay, so now we had a question today. I'm trying to see if I see the questioner, but it was about whether this is in sequence or in succession. In succession or simultaneous. And different moments are different, but definitely we have this, in the workshop, this dancer raises her hand and says, well, when do we do this? And Hiroko says, you do this all the time. Like, you were supposed to have all this artist, living in your belly button and, like behind the knee. That stuff is supposed to be sort of active constantly. And then what she's going to do is layer a whole bunch more stuff on top of that and tell her, no mas, right? Anyway, okay. Then you can string, sort of like larger segments together. Sorry, are you getting the? I apologize. I got you somewhere. So you have the worst seat in the house. I apologize. Anyway, so you have these discrete pieces of choreography, and then you connect them to other pieces of choreography. I just brought this. You've got the line of sight pursues the nerves that extend from fingertips of left hand, and then you see what Hijikata was looking at, and so voila, there's another source for him. All right. Anyway, so what is this imagery or evocative work? On a most basic level, it appears to allow movements to be more effective. Some of us were at a workshop with Maro Akaji, and he has this idea that we should be hung by a string. And then, I'm not going to really try to wholly do this because I have the wrong shoes and I'm a little bit older than I was, but he wants us to pop one leg out, drop down, and then pop right back up and get dragged up with that string. And then he tells us, look, if you just tried to do this with your muscles, you were going to get tired in a heartbeat. But if you can get that string to pull you up, you're going to be able to do this for a long time, right? So we're like, okay, I'm going to try damn hard to get that string to pull me up, because otherwise I'm going to fall over in a few seconds, right? We've all felt in our workshops that you have to make your concentration able to spread out to more parts of your body. there, and I'm thinking, okay, today I've got the spark burning me right here. I've got the back of my neck is melting away. What was the other one we had? I forgot. What's that?
Sand.
Oh yeah, and I got sand falling out of my ear, and then I'm like, oh crap, I forgot the back of my head for a second, right? So it gets you to be able to spread your concentration onto more things, right? And partly, this goes back to that socialization problem and being aware of the world. You gotta be paying attention to a lot of things if you're going to account for the socialization that's affected you all of your life. Today, we got asked to explore our space. And I was wandering around this room, and I noticed, it's going to be hard for you to see, but you may be able to look down. There's these lines that are darker. There's these spots that are darker, and then these spots that are lighter. And I can only guess that the dark ones are where the desks were, and people are like, moving their desk around and everything. I don't know, or something like that. And then the light ones are where people weren't banging so much on the floor. And so, I think that the location of desks in this room, I'm gonna look afterwards, you'll see it. I think the location of desks in this room left an imprint on this room in the markings on the floor, right? There's a lot of that all over the world, is where there's a mark on the floor if we got enough, sort of perceptiveness to see it. Or there's a mark on us if we have enough perceptiveness to see it. Then of course, you can get some pretty cool movements out of this. And then maybe more stuff I haven't thought about it. If you have some ideas, I'd love to hear them. All right. Let's switch gears for a second. Is Kobayashi here tonight? Oh, I can say anything I want. So Yvonne specifically asked me, since Kobayashi is with us, she was one of the chapters in A History of Butoh. He asked me to spend a little time talking about her. And she, in Group A, she explained a little bit about her childhood background and about her sense that this background of being just a little bit of an introvert and on her own, but also out in nature and getting bitten by leeches and being, plunging into streams and stuff like that, left her with a sort of an orientation to bodily sensation and perception. But I'll just share a few other parts of this story that she tells in her book. And one is that she explained that she showed up on Hijikata's doorstep, hi, I want to see Hijikata, and moved in that day. And she's in, right? She talked a little bit about being in, and on Wednesday we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I guess I'm doing 2 of these shows. Anyway, but she falls asleep, and then at 2 a.m. they wake her up because now it's time for training. And naturally enough, training starts at 2 a.m. because what other time would it start, And so then they train until 5 a.m., 6 a.m., something like that. And then she goes back to her bed, and is just on the verge of just passing out with exhaustion. And she says she has 2 experiences. And the one is that she suddenly remembers a time when she was a child when momentarily she couldn't stand up. And the other thing that she remembers is that another time in her life when she's just hanging out and suddenly her finger gets a little twitch that she didn't make the finger do the twitch, it just did it on its own. And so, I got ahead of myself, didn't I? I apologize. Anyway, okay, there we go. Yeah. Remembers this moment from when she was young and she suddenly couldn't stand for some amount of time. And remembers this moment when her finger does a twitch that she doesn't consciously control. So what does she get out of this? This is her first night, or I guess her first morning of Butoh. One thing that she gets is a huge portion of our past is stored up inside of us. And if you could find the right trigger, you could get to that. And this happens to us sometimes. You haven't thought about some childhood thing for, like 20 years, and suddenly you're like, oh yeah, there was that guy Carly Harris who I was friends with when I was 5, or something like that, right? And then the other thing is that we can be moved without our conscious mind doing the moving. And in our workshops, that's been a big theme. I think Rosemary says, surprise yourself, right? Joan says, not you telling it what to do, it does it, So these are big themes that not just through Kobayashi, but run through lots of different Butoh. Somehow figure out how you can be moved from outside of yourself, not just you controlling the movements. All right. Another step in her development is she reads the biologist and anatomist Miki Shigeo, and Miki has this idea. It's close to sort of the idea of ontology recapitulates phylogeny. Some of you probably know this overly fancy phrase, but the idea is that in our gestation state, we track the evolution of our species. There have been scientists who have discredited this idea. I'm not a smart enough scientist to be able to weigh in on this, but just so you know. But Miki was in a lot of people's minds, not just Kobayashi, Amagatsu Ushio from Sankaijuku. These people are reading Miki Shigeo. Some of them are going to his classes at the university, right? Second thing is that Miki thinks is that our DNA encodes our species memory. Those are his two ideas. DNA encodes species memory, and we reenact our evolutionary development in our gestational development, like inside of the womb. All right. So, what does that mean? Well, if you could access your own personal past with the right trigger, and DNA encodes all of our past, then it was a small jump to the idea that we could somehow access some species past if we had the right trigger, some sort of triggering, okay? And then of course, if we can be moved by something beyond ourselves and we have inside of ourselves the entire history of the evolution of humanity, then we can be moved by something way, way, way beyond ourselves. We can think about maybe we could be moved by something that happened thousands of years ago, stuff like that. And finally, she has this idea, I kind of skipped over this, I'm sorry, I was going to get to it, I had in my mind to think about it. Butoh, what is this word they use for this stuff? You know what, just hang on for a second. We're going to come back to this slide in just 2 seconds. All right, we got to go to a different slide first. Everybody hum the Jeopardy song for just a second. There we go, good. I feel better already. Okay, here we go. All right. Hello. Thank you for your participation. So they got different names for what they're doing. They don't have the name Butoh right away, okay? One name is Dance Experience. And the idea, they have a dance called 650 Experience Society. And it's because there's 650 seats in the theater, and everyone should have a different experience. So, of course, there's 650 experiences they just created, right? So, Dance Experience is one name. Terror Dance. as a name they have for what they're doing. The 9/11 hadn't happened then. Maybe terror dance hits us differently from how it would have hit them in 1959. And then they go to Ankoku Buyo, which is the dance of darkness. Buyo is a pretty standard word for dance. And then finally they get to Ankoku Butoh, all right? Bu is again a standard Chinese character for dance, and to means stamp or tread or something like that. But Butoh was already the word for the existing word for Western dance. So we don't know exactly why they chose this word. Maybe they're just casting around for a different word from what they had, but maybe it could mean that, Butoh is black waltz or something like that. We don't know. Anyway, but that's what they came up with. All right, so now, running back here a little teeny bit more, getting back to, here we are. This Ankoku thing, darkness, Kobayashi says that for her, Ankoku is just a shorthand for what we don't know, okay? She quotes Hijikata saying, she says about Hijikata used many words, but wasn't the amount that he couldn't put into words much bigger? I'm always worried about this portion rather than the portion that he could put into words. Like, there's stuff you can talk about, right? Well, I'm doing it right now. I've been doing it for 35 minutes and I'm not proud, whatever, right? I can go on for another 35 minutes, right? Anyway, maybe I will go on for another 35 minutes. Anyway, but what we don't know is this much huger thing, right? Darkness. So, this is Kobayashi's third set of conclusions. What we don't know is much, much, much bigger than what we know. And I'm even married to a scientist she's amazing. But she's doing her thing out there, she's called X-ray crystallography. It's pretty awesome that that's her gig, is X-ray crystallography, right? It sounds like it's Butoh already, right? We're a good match. But still, even for all of that, she's like, making good progress on her little thing, but what we don't know is huge, right? But nonetheless, we should try to draw on the vast reservoir of the universe. Remember, you don't have to be consciously get this. That's her supposition, is it doesn't have to be conscious. It can come to you somehow, right? And of course, we should have a little bit of humility about the fact that we don't know everything, right? Some people could use that lesson. I'm not making any political comment, okay? All right. Now, remember what we started with is we got all this awesome variety, and how did we get there? Well, so first thing we see is that Hijikata already had a lot of variety in him. He had those little mini narrative story dances. He had the Fluxus, neo-Dadaism happening, I'm pumping my billows on my chest dances. And then he's got these surrealist, personal exploration something dances, okay? So he's got three things, but he's not the only game in town, right? He's got other people who are acting right alongside of him. And one of them is Kasai Akira. And Kasai, the quick aperture into this is that Kasai studies eurythmy, and eurythmy really has this idea about voice power. And this is, I can't go into all of this quickly, but partly it's that sound itself has kind of its own logic to it, so he has these exercises where he says, make a vowel sound. And you're making like E or I or whatever, right? And then he says, now cup your hand over your ear so you're really getting a little bit of that echo going straight back in your own ear. So E, and I'm really feeling that E-ness right in my ear. And he says, let that affect the movement that you're doing. And then he says, now take your hand away and don't vocalize, but retain that E-ness in your movement. Whatever that E-ness did to your movement before, let it keep doing to your movement. So you can see that it's coming from a way different angle, but it's not so different from, well, what would it be like if you imagine being looked at from the upper right-hand corner of the stage, right? And then you say, okay, hold that upper right-hand corner of the stageness in your mind while you're doing your movement. Or hold the E-ness in your mind while you're doing your movement. Use minute reverberations of your voice, use different sounds, explore those sounds, and then Kasai just sets out on this superb, unbelievable cataloging process. And he's asking his dancers all this stuff, and it's really fantastic. He's saying, think about levels of reality. He says, do this movement while imagining you're in virtual reality. Now do the same movement while imagining you're in reality. You're like, dude, we are in reality. But now imagine we're in reality, right? Then he says, do this movement while imagining that you're in the imagination. That's kind of cool, you're like, right? Do this movement, but imagine that you're dreaming. So you can see that, or I love this one here, the grammatical gender. I mean, we don't even have this in English. They have it in German, right? So you can have the der words, the die words, and the das words. So he says, you should imagine that you are the der masculine grammatical gender. Not masculine gender. That's a different thing altogether. This is, imagine you are German masculine grammatical gender, and then do this movement, right? And then do it as, feminine gender, and then do it as neutral gender, right? Anyway, so Kasai is going through this massive cataloging thing, trying to figure out all the different ways that you could possibly transform a movement. Except for, of course, we've already seen that Hijikata has this other big, imagine yourself, like an artist living behind your kneecap, that kind of thing. That's not Kasai. Anyway, but, all right. Maro Akaji. Maro can seem a little tame, compared to these other two, but he talks about flavoring movements. You get a movement, and then you flavor it with something else, right? Okay? Tanaka Min. Tanaka Min did not start as Butoh, but two things happened to Tanaka that make him overlap with us and Butoh. The first is that they have a festival, a Japanese arts festival, in 1977 in Paris, and they try to invite Hijikata, and Hijikata is not interested in going, and so they invite Tanaka in his place. But then Hijikata sends his principal dancer, Ashikawa Yoko, to the festival. So Tanaka and Ashikawa alternate performances back and forth throughout the day, and everybody in Paris thinks they're the same thing, because of course they must be the same thing, they're Japanese, right? So how could they be doing two different things? I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic here. I don't want you to go home and quote me to your parents saying, anyway, okay, right? So the public starts to think of him as Butoh, and then eventually he just goes to Hijikata and he says, I want to study with you. He doesn't need to do this. It's actually a pretty amazing thing when you think about it, that he's already got this international career, and then he goes to someone and says, I'm going to study with you for a while. He calls himself a Butoh artist for 15 or so years, and then eventually he repudiates it, but somehow both by the fact that he studied with Hijikata and in the public's mind, what he does and Butoh become fused together. What's he doing? Never mind that history, what's he doing? Well, he's going out into nature and he's trying to be super duper responsive to nature. He's trying to let the slightest, breath of air that hits him somehow change what he's doing, or the way the sunlight is falling on him. He's mostly naked or nearly naked in these experiments. So in my mind, again, it's not the same thing at all, but there's something a little bit similar with the idea of, I'm going to see what that tiny piece of wind that's coming across from there and going out over there is going to do to my movements, as opposed to, I'm going to think about that artist behind my knee and what's that going to do with my movement. There's this interesting kind of like, it's different, but it's similar in some way. Anyway, he works with polyrhythms. He does lots of improvisations with American free jazz musicians. He's working with polyrhythms, stuff like that. He does farming. Rosemary talked about that a little bit. And again, in farming, if you're going to pick cucumbers, you've got to go where the cucumbers are. You don't get to pick how you do the cucumbers. I mean, if you're like, I want to pick, well, maybe if you're flexible enough, you're going to make it. But for most of us, we're not going to. So it's something that like forces you to get out of yourself and go to it. And if you're going to milk a goat, you're not going to have a cucumber picking posture in order to milk a goat well. I grew up milking a cow, so I know this, okay? You cannot, you gotta get down like this, right? Okay. And he comes up with this idea of body weather, the super shorthand. Rosemary gave us a longer explanation, but be as malleable and changeable as the weather and be responsive to the weather. All right, so, sort of like, continuity, is that the word I'm looking for? Resonances across these things. Spreading out your concentration, being sensitive to the world around you. We had part of our workshop was to be, close our eyes for a while and not have sight anymore. And we had to quit relying on that visual thing that we rely on so much. And let those ears tell us where things are so that we didn't bang into people. And we weren't just, I don't know about everybody else, I wasn't just over in the corner being sightless. I was wandering my way through until bouncing off walls, So anyway, and only touching a few people on the way. So spreading concentration, fragmenting our body, compartmentalizing our body. So there are some continuities through this, okay? All right. Anyway, so that, that gets me sort of to the end of what I came prepared to do. And Yvonne, I told you I could talk for another 35 minutes, and I actually have what slide are we on? I have 40 more slides in here. There are other weird things. So anyway, I'm not going to go, that's the end of what I came prepared to do. But Yvonne said he wants time for us to have a conversation. It doesn't just have to be you asking me, we can all talk together. But anyway, so it's time now for Q&A. Yes.
One thing that I'm curious about, only because I've actually only seen limited video of Hijika's performance, and even less with the original audio in the room. But as far as what the dances sound like, that's a lot more ephemeral. But it's not a recording and it's not exactly written down. But were there specific live musicians or recorded composers that were influential, or a use of the body to produce sound? Is it just the sounds of the body stomping, sliding, or were there musical collaborators, influences in the space, or musicians that the Hijikata these other dances drew from?
That is a great question. It's about what was the sound, and I have to put in a plug. There's going to be a book coming out by a scholar by the name of Natasha Foreman. Everybody put Natasha Foreman in the back of your mind. It's going to be amazingly brilliant. Anyway, Natasha is totally like going right down your alley, and it is brutal, I have to say, because this guy Hijikata, he was drawing on a lot of stuff. Anyway, so it's mostly recorded music, and there are some characteristics. It leans to sort of experimental music and, you know, kind of Western classical music, and sort of new world, new agey kind of music. And then beyond that, they're choosing which version of the music that they want quite carefully. So when they're doing a dance to Bailero, they're not just getting the first Bailero they can find, they're getting a particular Bailero. So they're hunting hard for the kind of music they want. They're using Percy Faith re-recordings rather than originals, stuff like that. And then partly, they have the idea that you shouldn't necessarily match the music, or in fact it could be bad to match the music because that's a little bit boring. And so sometimes he's doing things like just cutting off the music right in the middle of a scene, or just cycling the music on a loop, and then cutting it off, you know, 3.5 times through the loop or something like that. So there's something pretty meta going on with the use of music, for sure, 100%.
There's a lot of incongruity.
Yeah, I'm for sure an incongruity. And Joe, yeah, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, maybe the first with the workshop, also at the Kashimara that I put upon. I remember Judge asked a question about music, and I remember him saying basically it goes together. It doesn't have, you know, all these possibilities of this relationship of your movement and the music. So it doesn't always parallel, it can be opposite, it can go together, so that. But I was going to say, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Tohoku Fubuki, for example, sort of, I don't know at what point, maybe it's when after Hijikata passed and Ashikawa had Hakutobo, but when my experience of being there, we had a musical director who was like a guitarist, and we often had a bass player. So those people were always, you know, creating the music, in my experience.
Yeah, so for sure, in the post-Hijikata era with Hakutobo, you do have a music director making original music for pieces. But in the Hijikata era, he's not really doing that. Yeah.
And also, isn't it true that even the rebellion of the body, that isn't the original music, is it? I think when we see the film. So some of these early films, I don't even know whether it's the original music.
There's several films that have had music added in after the fact. Rose Colored Dance and Masur, and this one that the Hijikata Tatsumi and Japanese people have had music added in after the fact. With Hijikata Tatsumi and Japanese people, we know that there was the noise of a Honda motorcycle engine, and there was apparently at one point, you know, they have the pianist playing Liszt.
And Hijikata and Japanese people?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, definitely a Honda motorcycle engine as part of this, and then a pianist playing Liszt. Yeah, in the back here.
When I hear Butoh being described, there's usually the element of post-war, World War II, post-Hiroshima dance.
Mm-hmm.
The way I describe it is like a post-World War II absurdist Japanese dance, experimental Japanese absurdist dance. So my question is two parts. One is, how did post-Hiroshima World War II impact the making and the elements of it? Because I can understand that it has, but I'm curious to hear how you experienced that or read about it. And then the other part would be like, what is your one sentence of what is Butoh?
We are not doing a one sentence of Butoh. We're just refusing that question because what I hope you see here is that Hijikata has all this variety in him, and then you've got all these other people who are doing other things, and then, what we get to in our workshops is our workshops definitely do not look like each other. We're doing different things, and so that's why I'm sort of like politely trying to refuse the one sentence, because I just can't do it. I've been trying for since, what year am I talking about? A long time, since 1994 to give the one sentence, and I've just failed too many times. So anyway, I'm the academic and I'm failing, so. You guys picked to come to me, so, you could have said, he can't even say it in one sentence, we're not going to his talk. That was, you could have, anyway, but let's get back to post-war. So, the tricky thing about your question is particularly like the post-Hiroshima atomic bomb thing. When, I skipped over this whole thing. Rosemary has this idea about a Butoh diaspora. It's when Butoh spreads out into the world. And the first stop is Paris in 1978. And these dancers go there and they dress themselves in rags, and and one of them is covered with kind of like, looks like he's got paste that's got straw mixed into it and stuff like that. And now we all know there's a history of this because we had plaster of Paris and stuff like that. But the Parisian audience thinks that these people in rags with this weird stuff on their face they must be a survivor from the atomic bomb. But the performers didn't talk about that. The performers never talked about that. There's only really been one performer that's ever really talked in the early era of Butoh about the atomic bomb, and that was Oscar Isamu. And his parents came from Hiroshima. But none of the other dancers ever talk about that. So I guess there's two questions. Why didn't they talk about it? And what does that mean for us? Well, for one, there's a lot of art that made about the atomic bomb that is very, very amazing art. But there's also an idea that that's cheating. So there's some really amazing stuff, and then there is a kind of a baseline about you just went for the cheating thing. So most of these dancers did not ever want to be thought of as going that route. Japanese dancers talking to fellow Japanese people, that wasn't on their radar. But here, they were in Paris, and everyone in Paris was saying, oh, you must be associated with the atomic bomb. So that became a really strong interpretation that has continued even to this day about them, when that doesn't appear that was what was on their radar. Anyway, so that's what's interesting about this, is they weren't talking about it to anybody, but the dance critics in Paris were definitely talking about that. And then that gets sucked along to newspaper articles in the United States and other places. Anyway.
So
That all said, the atomic bomb changed us, right? So it's likely that when we watch a Butoh performance which seems to feature intense suffering, that like our collective, theater going experience has been changed to sort of expect something like that in a way. So I'm not saying there's no connection whatsoever. I'm saying it's, in my opinion, it's you have to be careful about that connection. It's not a simple connection. It's more like a atomic bomb changes our theater viewing expectations, or watching art about the atomic bomb changes our theater viewing expectations, and that somehow Butoh performers respond to that. But it's not like, oh, I'm making a dance about the atomic bomb. That never happens that I'm aware of. Anyway.
There seems to be like a resurgence or a influence of absurdism after the war in several different countries with absurdist art, and so maybe that is a coincidence, not necessarily a result of war.
So, but what you're saying is you're giving a much more persuasive explanation, right? Like, if humanity has these experiences and just sort of throws its hand up and says, the world is absurd, that's an understandable way that we could connect this intense trauma with this specific art form. You understand what I'm saying? It's a lot different to say there's an explosion of absurdist art around the world after multiple kinds of trauma around the world, as opposed to saying Butoh dancers are making atomic bomb dance. That's harder in my mind to claim.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead. We got so many questions, I'm sorry. We'll keep talking until, I can go on for another 35 minutes, remember.
I learned about Dadaism in college. I'm still not familiar with it, and I'm even more unfamiliar with Neo-Dadaism. My question is, how does Butoh fit more into Neo-Dadaism versus original Dadaism? Is it more like a timeline thing? Is the answer
Just a timeline.
Okay, I was wondering if it was like a mentality thing.
If they would have been performing at the same time as Marcel Duchamp is doing Armat, then I would be saying Dadaism. But they're like a generation later. So and there were like people in Japan who called themselves the Neo-Dada organizers, and they did things like invite people to parties and measure people and outfit people with personal coffins because they might be exposed to radiation, or pin clothespins on people's ears and stuff like that. So there's no meaningful distinction in the way I intend to use the word between Neo-Dadaism and Dadaism.
Got you. It's just part one, part two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just talking about the founding of Butoh, just curious about your perspective on the contributions of Kazuo Ono in the.
Oh, that is a fantastic question. You alertly noticed that I skipped him.
Yeah.
So, again, for me, this is an interesting, it's an interesting sort of like academic problem, how to talk about this. Hijikata is such a domineering personality, so he's kind of been calling most of the shots for a long time. And Ono, I mean, he knows about Ono, he invites Ono in. Ono's, part of training. Sometimes they're having, all the dancers have reading assignments, and then they, do their reading assignment, and then they watch Hijikata and Ono discuss the reading assignment. Ono's a big part of this, but until 1977, it's all Hijikata's choreography. And then after 1977, it's still some of Hijikata's choreography that Ono is resurrecting from his roles in Hijikata's dances. But Ono travels and Hijikata doesn't. And Ono is such an amazing performer that he captures everybody's attention. I can't count how many times I've read someone say that they watched Ono and they just found themselves weeping. They don't know exactly why they're weeping. Some of it is probably just some kind of like, tremendous outpouring of emotion for this old man who's, by the time any European sees him. He's 80 years old, you know, and we're not used to watching 80-year-olds dance and put themselves out there for us. Anyway, so you nicely bring up something which is, for me, is a really interesting thing, which is that Ono and Tanaka and people like that become the European public face of Butoh, and people don't really know about Hijikata. He's just out, you know, we've heard that name, it's way back there somewhere. So the articles say, this was founded by Hijikata, but no one knows about him because he's not traveling. But Ono's traveling, he goes everywhere, and he astounds people. So for me, we can't really have Butoh as we know it today without Ono and Sankai-juku to put Butoh on the map, but he's not a super strong part of the beginning of it. So, anyway.
And do you think this is one of the reasons why some scholars, they hesitate to use the term co-founder for Kazuo Ono, and they portray Hijikata as the chief architect?
This is why I would say that.
Because
I wouldn't like that
leadership.
term. Because Ono is, I mean, his presence is huge. They need him. I mean, he has this long, long dancing career before Hijikata even gets started. It's a pre-war dancing career. And then he's more active immediately after the war, where Hijikata, it's taking him a while to get his footing. So they need Ono. They need his prestige. They need his knowledge. Sometimes they just even need his studio. But it would be hard for me to use the word co-founder for him, even if I'm totally prepared to acknowledge that without him, we might not be here today. Because he's, you know, in the European world, the non-Japanese world, he's such a huge presence that it's likely that without him, yeah.
Coming back to the Hiroshima origin thing, I'm curious, so this starts in Paris and then it kind of spreads around. I'm curious if you've heard about any of this traveling back to Japan, either amongst discussion of the performers, of the artists, or even some people talking about this like it was a real thing, kind of like, I'm thinking the way that sushi types were created in the US and then went back to Japan, or pizza got, you know, changed in the US and then traveled back to Europe. If there was any of that story moving, it's circulating around the Western world, and then if parts of it are landing back in Japan that you've encountered.
So there's a specific part of your question that I'm hearing in a general part. It's certainly the case that these guys, and they're mostly guys, right? They are performing once or twice a year. Joe, and I know you're not a guy, okay? I get that. They're performing once or twice a year, and the structure of the theater system is that they have to pay the theater owner to perform. The theater owner is not paying them. So they're saving up money, and they're, you know, badgering all their friends to go to the shows. They get to keep the gate receipts, but they pay the theater owner, so if they don't have enough sales, it's out of their pocket. So that's not a recipe for a super successful performing art. They're not super widely known in Japan. And definitely when they get recognition outside of Japan, that does give them a boost back home. But I would say so that's the general part of your question. The specific part of your question is, I think most of the Japanese observers are kind of mystified when they hear that everybody in the West thinks it's a Hiroshima art form. They're like, why the hell do they think that? That's weird. Because they never thought that. It was never presented to them in that context. Yeah. I think you were also...
We admitted that the Butoh founders recognized the vastness of the unconscious knowledge, right? And they even had a name for it, untold.
Well, that's Kobayashi's interpretation. That's not Hijikata didn't say that, but yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand. Did they actually make any attempts to draw out something meaningful out of this space of the unconscious knowledge, rather than using the Dadaistic techniques, which kind of you are random, throw something in the wall and see what comes out? Did they use systematic approaches, something like drugs, I would think, or literature, to actually explore the content of the unconscious?
There were some drugs, but not I think like what you're thinking about. It's mostly amphetamines. There was that. Yeah, so I mean, it appears that Hijikata was an amphetamine addict at the end of his life. So I mean, that's a little bit shaky. Don't go home and say that to your parents either, but that's what it appears to be. But I'm not aware of any concerted effort like you're talking about. It really is mostly kind of leaving it up to surrealism to expose whatever it will expose of, either the unconscious world or the benefit that you can get of using randomness to, something like that. Yeah, Joan.
What's the expression that they would talk about, that when you leave your country and become well known elsewhere and then you go back, that you mentioned, there's a particular expression.
Yeah, no, there's like the Jaku Yunyu, the reverse importation.
But I'm actually raising my hand because you would have something to say.
I wanted, but
Yeah, no.
no, I wanted to move to later before, but no, you want to say something?
No.
Oh, okay, no, I wanted to just refer with a few questions about the question plus comment, because I agree totally, because I'm also in working in Australia, and people say, oh, Butoh is coming from atomic bomb, or like people really stereotype, but I agree, because that time we didn't have any internet or nothing to see the actual pictures every day about atomic bomb, and my grandparents' generations and all that never seen actual images, and they were just a national psyche, but not really actualized in a visual. But I can feel that sense, and people feel that that's not. So I feel like that's a little bit gap in that sense of, we see now as our images see in Butoh as like this is Butoh and things, but previously much more subtle, and today the Saga-san's workshop saying rather than react, they just take in first, then respond afterward. So I really think it's wonderful what you answered, and I said I agree, because none of Japanese people thinking about this was what we're doing as an atomic bomb reaction. But we are tend to be like, this is Butoh and this is, and then I'm also curious why you do this, but this more internally national psyche, we just have a feel like that, as you said, DNA from Hijikata research. So for me, the question also is that, so with this now, in the 21st century, got so many images, and every day we're watching Butoh on YouTube, how we can do something? What's your question? And where your observation about Butoh now on, from this kind of history?
Wait, I'm not sure I caught your question.
Yeah.
You're asking what's the role of Butoh in a society which is saturated with images?
No. Maybe images is my just a sidetrack, because I was curious about this Hiroshimas, and we can tend to do that, and I got a lot of questions from people too. But in this 21st century of a lot of images, we also tend to categorize, and then I don't have an answer either, but I'm just curious, personally asking a question or somebody, what's the Butoh taking place with these multiple images? That's a question to them, but what's the Butoh?
So it might actually be better to ask all the people who came here to take workshops that question than me, right?
I'm just curious, because you're so smart, so you can...
It's a good question to carry with you, though, when considering this world of images. How many different Butohs are there?
Yeah, I was curious. I don't have those.
I mean, I can make a few stabs at this. One is that precisely because there's so much flying around us, it's nice to be told to block something outright and just walk through the room with your eyes closed and, listen. That's a kind of cool thing, right? And so I think some of us seek that out, like the chance to be told, shut something out. That's probably important, right? Like, I teach Japanese theater, a Japanese theater class, and this is not about Butoh, but when I teach traditional Japanese theater, I want to explain to them that it was a very different world where this was happening. And so I make them not use their electronics for one day. And of course I don't know whether they cheat or not, but I tell them, no internet, no radio, no phone, no nothing. Take notes in your class with a pencil, right? And then, because I want them to slow their body clock down so they can be kind of close to what it would be like to be a 13th century Japanese person watching a theater performance on stage. So that might be part of it, right? Like Rosemary has articles about people going to kind of like nature Butoh experiences. Do we want to have someone tell us to go out and listen to the bird songs and the, feel the sunlight on us rather than having one more moment of our life looking at this damn thing? Probably, right? So those are some guesses about this. But also, I could go on for a long more time. But anyway, those are some guesses.
We have 8 minutes left.
Do we have to be out here in 8 minutes?
Yeah, the park ranger is going to come kick us out.
How many of us are there? Let's beat him up.
So interesting.
We're gonna go to my truck out there, that's the big red truck, and we're gonna have the post discussion in the back of my truck. Because it's big enough to fit all of us. No, I'm kidding.
I was so interested to see some pages from Hijikata's scrapbooks, and particularly this element that some of the notes were written in someone else's handwriting, someone who had better handwriting. Do we know that these were Hijikata's thoughts transcribed, or could he have invited collaborators to add to his notes?
It's super doubtful. I mean, he is super controlling. Like the dancers, it's too bad we don't have Kobayashi here, but the dancers talk about he's super, super controlling. So it's so doubtful to me that he was saying, oh, you put your thoughts in here. That said, I do think that, in my book, I try to sort out whether Ashikawa deserves some credit for the creation of this. And it's a super vexed question, and I don't have a very good answer in my book, but she's an art student, and he's looking at art. At least one person has to be, giving, I'm totally 100% convinced that there's at least one person who's adding to this. In terms of collaboration, he is inviting costume designers and poster designers, and there is a kind of interesting, banging into each other and seeing what comes out of the sparks for sure in that area. But it's super hard for me to imagine that he was handing the notebook off to someone and saying, okay, now I responded in my bad handwriting, you respond in good handwriting. That's so hard for me to imagine that anyway.
So I'm just interested in what, earlier we started out talking about socialization and wanting to dismantle that and get underneath that. And then he's turning to Western images, which seems to me like a highly socialized structure. And could you speak to that? And then also, he also didn't travel, but yet I would like some light shed on this connection between the German expressionists, Mary Wigman, Anja Holm, and like the kind of work that was being done in Germany that supposedly had some influence, and how, if there was any, how did that happen?
I'm going to switch these, take the second question first and the first question second. So, all of the dancers have a modicum of training in several different kinds of dance. Tap and ballet and flamenco. But the primary training is in German expressionist dance. Rosemary and I, when we co-edited our volume, we had this scholar from France who I'd had this interesting conversation with, and she made this super fascinating observation. What she said is, in the post-war era in France, you were not allowed to talk about German expressionism because of Nazism, right? But all the teachers in the entire country had been trained in that, and the audiences had been trained in that. So when they saw Butoh, her hypothesis is they saw something that resonated with this deep German expressionism in the Parisian dance world. Even if no one could say the word, no one was saying these guys are the carriers of German expressionism. So that's their training is in their primary training is in German expressionist dance, or we should be careful with that. What they knew of as German expressionist dance, which was probably like slightly altered, but yeah, that was their primary training. Now I lost your first question.
The socialization
Oh.
of Western paintings.
So I'm not 100% sure that Hijikata took what he was doing that far. In terms of trying to be that hyper aware of what's the socialization behind this thing I'm sucking in. I think it really was more kind of omnivorous. He's just sucking in so much stuff and taking things from it. It would be a little hard to articulate. I mean, Kurt Vermley definitely tried to feel around in these notebooks to see if he could find some through lines, and he came up kind of empty with through lines in these notebooks. You've got Assyrian reliefs, images of Assyrian reliefs, and you've got, clearly Klimt and Bacon and stuff like that. So there's more European art, there's rather less traditional Japanese art, but it's not completely not there. So I'm not sure he was going in that direction.
So omnivores.
Yeah, omnivore. Did you have your hand up? I thought you had your hand up. Oh,
I was
sorry.
going to say some more stuff, but there's not really here.
Anyway, all right. How are we doing? Before we have to beat that guy up.
3 minutes left.
3 minutes, 3 minutes. You're on for the last 3 minutes.
I have a historiographic question.
Ooh, awesome.
I'm curious if you think that there are any like conspicuous gaps in Butoh history, and or if you had stuff that you're thinking about, you just didn't publish it. You can tell us now.
Okay, so absolutely 100%. So we do have. So what I've tried to explain here is that we have this strong critical presence. They're going to France, they're being received in France, and they're being, they can't believe how the reception they're getting, because the theater owner is paying them to do this rather than them having to pay the theater owner. The theater owner has people that have subscriptions to the theater. They're like sending out saying, hey, we got a new thing in town, come watch it, and people are showing up. It's fantastic, right? But there's this reception, which is fantastic, but there's also this strong critical overlay over the top of this, which is atomic bomb and stuff. And it takes people like me and Tanya and Rosemary a while to overturn that. We're trying as hard as we can. Now we got a book out that, we got open access and stuff like that. But so yeah, one big story is precisely there's all these huge gaps. And so one of the ways to think about what I wanted to do with my academic trajectory is put Hijikata, that's my first book, put Hijikata back in the conversation that he was kind of left out of. It's not just Ono and Tanaka, there was this guy in the center of it. The second book was, we've got all these, first and second generation performers like Kasai. We don't know that much about them, so Rosemary and I, the conversation was really about what do we need to have out there in order for people to have a better understanding of this art form. And so we made the list of what are the artists we need to, part of the list was Rosemary and I thinking about what are the people that we know of. Maybe there's some people out there we don't know of, but what are the people we know of? Well, we know Tanya, and we're going to get Tanya to do an X for us, right? Or something like that. So that was part of it, and then part of it was, what are the chunks that we need? Well, we need a Kasai chunk, because no one is writing about this guy, and that sucks, right? Or we need a Mato chunk or something like that. So part of it was, who do we have? What do we need? And then, and then we're going to throw out a call for what we need but we don't have, and also what we don't even know we need yet because someone else is working on something that we're not even aware of. That was totally like our MO for this project. So there were big gaps. And the sneak peek at, this is the fourth shameless plug, is that the current project is really about, talking, specifically talking about those gaps and why they happened, and then B, just exploring the, edges of Butoh for the past 15 years. And the list is really amazing, like you got Boris Sharmat's driving a pickup truck backwards around the stage. Well, Jeanette Vallée-Brard declaims Hijikata's lines. I mean, there's batshit crazy cool stuff going on out there, and I'm just trying to throw some of it out there. So.
I guess I'll ask the last question.
Yvonne gets to ask the last one. Here comes Yvonne. There he is right there.
One more? Is there? Okay, so.
There he is right there.
Oh, he's invisible.
We're imagining him.
Last question for the night. So, as many of you know, we have two incredible teachers here with us, Saga Kobayashi-san and Seisaku-san, who both danced under Hijikata and trained directly. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the importance of and the influential legacy and influential impact of Hijikata's choreographic method and his Butoh method? You mention it a bit in your new book, in the Hijikata chapter, because those teachers, they include transmissions about Hijikata's choreographic method in their workshops, and I'd love to hear from you some of your thoughts of what are some of the most important elements that come to mind about the influential impact of Hijikata's choreographic method.
Well, I think what's exciting for me, and this gets back to my organizing principle for the whole thing, is we're getting to the point where people can look at a lot of different spots of this and figure out, well, what's the thing that resonates with me, right? And so a lot of people and many people who are taking these workshops are maybe interested in these transformation techniques or these psychophysical, imagery work techniques. And Kasai does it in his way with imagining that E sound and how that affects it. Tanaka is out there, trying to let that little, gust of wind change his body in some way. So some people are interested in that. Some people are just interested in the surrealist writing, when I show these pictures of the workbooks, and then it turns out that there's this artist out there, Richard Hawkins, who he's making these amazing art based upon Hijikata's scrapbooks. So that's what's exciting to me today, and that's the cool thing about this upcoming project of mine, is that now people have the access to Hijikata has different eras, and there's other people who are doing different things, and they're calling themselves the same thing. And so, for me, that's what's important, is that it doesn't just have to be one thing. It can be a multitude of things. You know, like Ono's work has been out there, you know, a little bit, you know, Ono from within and from without, that's been out there. So people can access that more directly, even if you couldn't make it. So with Rosemary, one of the chapters that I'm most proud about is the chapter about An-Magrith. And this is this Iraqi choreographer that ends up in the States and then subjected to, you know, kind of racialized discrimination because, you know, well, he must be, you know, one of those damn terrorists kind of things. And then he has never seen 1 second of Butoh in his life. He's only seen pictures. But the pictures speak to him in such a profound way that he uses it as a way to create a performance. So I'm like, that's awesome. I don't care if you haven't taken lessons with anybody. You took that and you used it in your way. And Rosemary, she was even better than me at articulating this, but it's like, we didn't think of our job as to police the boundaries of Butoh. We thought of our job as like, what are the edges of this thing? And one of the edges, a really awesome edge, was someone who didn't see 1 second of it and took no lessons and just saw photos, went and made a dance. Well, that's a pretty awesome, you know, like, endpoint, right? Or, you know, in another chapter was about a person who, you know, sort of rode Butoh through when she had gender confirmation surgery. I mean, I wasn't expecting, I don't know if you were expecting that one, I wasn't expecting that one in the beginning. That's a pretty important story to tell. If, you know, you're feeling, you know, not right in your body, and Butoh helps you through that process, that's a powerful story, you know? And the more that I can be a part of getting that level of access out to a lot of people, I think that's my job, right there, and I'm done.
The raffle moment.
Wait!
Okay, mix.
Wait, sir? How many people didn't get the ad?
Well, I gave it to the community members and they were supposed to pass it. So
Your community members
We rigged it. If I win, I'm going to donate.
Yvonne, does this have to do something in between now and tomorrow?
It belongs to An's daughter, and it's her makeup bag.
Oh, so we can't keep it.
Well, her daughter needs her makeup.
Is some reliable non-cheater, like Rosemary, do you have something? Because Rosemary's not in the competition. So, do you have something you
Okay,
can store this?
here's the solution. We're going to draw one now, and that's the free book that Bruce gives away. And then all of you can have your names. The second free book will be courtesy of Yvonne and Salish Butoh. So draw a name out, then you have yours, and there will be a second one.
Well, now the third person.
Okay, go ahead.
So now some people are like rethinking because they're thinking strategically. There's fewer people.
I'm trying to be generous here.
All right. Drum roll. Apple Martine.
Apple! So those of you can add your names, do this, and then we'll do it again. Right. So thank you so much for coming. Tomorrow the lecture series continues. Tomorrow we will have